Okay, these are a bunch of accessories and a bunch of consumables that you will need for putting your camera together. So I wanted to go over them really quickly, and I'm going to go over them one by one. This is, of course, a cable release. That's handy, not necessary, not necessary. In fact, this is an optional. This is an optional. Now, this is a finder from a Mamiya press camera, and it's a 65 millimeter finder. Now it's designed for 6x9, and I'm shooting 6x12. But when I have my 65 millimeter lens, I like this a whole lot because it is a finder that bends the light the way that you, well, actually it doesn't bend the light, but it gives the optics, and it gives a very similar view of what a 65 millimeter lens is, and that's very wide on this type of camera. Now this is another finder. This is a turret finder, and this is a KMZ turret finder. I think it's KMZ. Well, it says Optimus on the top, but it has a bunch of different settings. So this is a 135, that is a 90, that's an 85, a 50, a 35, and we're back to the 135. So you just roll that around, and that can help out quite a bit. Now, I do have a printed finder, so you may decide that you want to use one of these, and you may decide that you want to use a printed finder. So these are the optional. These are, well, actually, this is an optional as well. This is just a bubble level finder, and it fits in a cold shoe, and I have a shoe to put this in. And it's really nice because when you're shooting 6x12, if the flat plane is not perfectly aligned with the horizon, it's very noticeable because of how wide that image is. So this helps you stay flat as well as possible. This is super important. This is not an option. This is an M65 to M65 helical, which means it has M65 threads on the inside and has M65 threads there. So the idea is that you could, if you had a 65 millimeter thread, you could thread it in there. I have a lens board that will fit on this. This particular one is a 17 to 31 millimeter travel on this, which means that when it is completely at its most closed position, its shortest position, it is 17 millimeters from the back to the front plate. So that is 17 millimeters. And as you extend it out, this is our focusing mechanism, it goes to 31 millimeters. So that's the reason why it's a 17 to 31. Now, all of my lens cones are based on using a 17 to 31 millimeter M65 to M65 helical. You can use some other ones. There are some longer ones. There are some that go, I think, 35 to 50, or some other longer numbers. You'll just have to do some math to figure out which lens cone to use. Now, this is one of the most important things. This is, of course, the lens. This is the lens we're going to use on today's build. This is a Topcon 105 4.5, and this is a really good lens, and it's cheap. These are in the $100 to $200 price on eBay right now, and sometimes you can get them really close to that $100 price, depending on the stock and what's available. The next thing that I'm going to talk about is the glue. I have two different kinds of glue. I recommend this glue. Now, if you can get it in your area, this is Scotch Maximum Strength Glue. If you can get it in your area, this is really good because it is it's stinky, so you want to use it in a well-ventilated environment. But this stinky glue is very good, very strong, and it doesn't discolor the plastic. I'm going to show you an example of how super glue, the other option, this is super glue, just plain old super glue. That can discolor the PLA plastic that we use. So I'm going to recommend this if you can get it and you can work in a ventilated area. If not, super glue will certainly work. It will certainly hold. So here are the tools that that I recommend. You can use a slightly different set of tools, but these are the tools that I think are really good to use. First one is sandpaper. And this happens to be a very fine grit. This is 400. You don't have to have it that fine. I just happen to have 400 on hand. It was handy. It was in this nice little sheet. So that is 400 grit paper. Now, pliers. This just happens to be a multi-tool, so it's got a bunch of different things. But what I'm going to use this for is the pliers, okay? Then we have a snap-off box cutter or utility knife, that type of thing. We have a metric hex set. So this one goes from 1.5 up to 6 millimeters in size. What you're going to use is the 2.5 and the 2. The 2.5 and the 2 hex for this project. Now, this is just a utility knife, so I use that for some scraping. 2 different pairs of scissors, and these are titanium bladed scissors. They're very handy being titanium bladed, and I'll show you. I use those for scraping, and that does a bigger job and a faster job than the sandpaper does at times. This is a screwdriver set, and the screwdriver set, and one of the reasons why I use it is it has a hex bit. If you have this type of thing, you can use it in lieu of that, or if you have this, you can use it in lieu of that. So you don't have to use both of those. This is something that's really nice. I picked this up at the store for $10. I picked it up at Target stores. And what it is it's a little, as I turn it on, you can hear, it's like a little Dremel-like tool, but it was designed for buffing fingernails. And I saw it, it was $9.99, came with a bunch of different tools on it. And I keep a relatively square like grinding stone wheel on it. Then we have tape. Now this particular tape is Scotch brand 235 tape, and I'm just reading it from the inside. This is tape that is actually made for its opacity to light. It is paper tape, like masking tape, and just one layer of this paper tape. One layer of that paper tape is opaque. So actually right now, I don't have a necessary use for it, but it's great to have on hand. We probably will not use it in today's build, but we may, just in case we have a little bit of a light leak somewhere, and I'll show you how to test for those light leaks. Now the last thing is, this is just a piece of plexiglass, and you can see, or perspex, whichever you want to call it. And you see it's frosted on one side. I got 2 sheets on Amazon for like $14, and they're like 12 by 12 or 14 by 14. It's a very good value, and if you can get that, that's really good. If not, we can use Scotch tape. Now I don't have tape here, and what you want is the frosted type of plastic cello tape or Scotch brand tape or whatever you want to call it. Magic tape. What it is we're just talking plastic tape, and that will work as well in lieu of the frosted plexiglass that I have right there. These are the printed parts that you need. So this is the body. This is the nose cone. This is the lens cone. This is the door, the back door that keeps all the light in, or keeps all the dark in. I'm going to move some of these parts to the side. We have 2, in fact, actually, we have 2 sets of shims. These are the body shims, and they will go between the body and the nose cone if we need to shim it. I don't think we're going to need to shim it today, but if we need to, we will, and this is for focus. And that's actually, we won't put them on in the initial build. When we get to focusing, we'll put that on. This is also, in fact, I have 2 of these as well. These go between the nose cone, or excuse me, between the nose cone and the helical if we need to shim out the helical again. So I'll talk about that in when we get to the point of making sure that we have focus. We have two grips. We have two parts that fit inside the body. They fit in the bottom of the body to hold the film reels in. We have two knobs for advancement. We have two door latches. And if you notice, they've got some plastic around them. Here, let me make sure that you can see that. They have some plastic around them. I'm going to talk about taking all that plastic off. This is the film reminder. We have four little things that look like hammers, and these are pegs that go in that affix the two parts to the door together. This is the finder. This is the finder that I am supplying with it. It is a universal finder. Again, when we get to focusing and setting up the lens on the camera, we will go over that once more. Now, this is the advance paddle. This is the advance spindle, and it has the paddle already put in there. And once again, that is the other advanced spindle, and it has the paddle already in there. This is the lens cone, or excuse me, this is the lens board. The lens will actually mount to this. This will then screw on the end of the M65 helical, and then you screw the helical onto the front of the cone. You put the cone on the body. So we're going to go over all of that as we do our build. Before you put together your camera, before you start putting together the parts, I want you to notice that there are lots of little plastic edges here. We can definitely see them right there. They're little plastic, like a flare that goes out around the edge of the of each one of the parts. Now that's one of the things that most 3D printers are set up to do, and it helps keep the part on the print bed. So we need to go around and we need to take that off of every one of these. And sometimes it's a little bit easier than others. Sometimes you can do it with your fingers. Sometimes you just have to pull it or do it with your knife. Either one of those things will work. Now, you're going to throw away most of this stuff, but you're going to keep some of it, and I'm going to tell you about that. And I'm going to tell you about that when we get to the part of putting the nose cone onto the body, and something that I found out. So we're going to get rid of, in this case, this all the way around. So this is okay. There we go. Okay. Now there's also another part of the outside of the door. Okay, so there's the inside of the door, and the inside of the door is the side that faces the film. It is not really a pressure plate. It is just a plate that holds the film flat. So it's not, it doesn't move. But so the pressure plate is on one side. That's the inside. And then we have this other side, and the other side has a ridge here and a ridge on the other. And then it is tapered at the ends so that we can put it in, put it into the body. Now, one of the things, this printed, they kind of connected together. This printed down and this printed down because I needed these designs to come up and be printed upwards. And this is the way they should be printed. The problem is there's a little lip in this one where it goes in and then it goes up, and this needs to be taken off as well. So I'm just going to run my knife along there. When you're doing this, make sure that you wear some eye protection and be very careful. And this part is going to peel off once I run my knife along there, so that peels off quite well. And then I'm going to finish that out. Good one there. There we go. Okay. Just have a little bit of trimming to do at the edge of this one. There we go. Okay. So this is actually a pretty complicated little bit of trimming, but it is very much necessary. And you need to go through and make sure that you have all of that trimmed out, because anything will keep the door, anything that's left in there will keep the door from closing properly. And then the last thing that we're going to do with this is we are going to fit it to the body. And sometimes that takes a little bit of additional maneuvering. Now, there are also these things. Do you see how there's a hole here? And, there are 4 holes in there. There's also a 5th hole. Let me put them so that they're the same way. But there are 4 holes in this one. But then you can see that there are 4 little places that correspond on that door. Well, we need to, and I use the smaller scissors and the point to get that out. There are 4 little pieces of plastic that just need to be popped out of there. So they're pretty quick and pretty easy, and they come out fairly easily. Okay, so now I need to tell you that there are there are 2 different ways of putting this together. There are 2 different ways of putting it together. I'm going to show you both right now. One of them uses these plastic pegs. Now, I really liked my idea of the plastic pegs, and again, I need to trim these things out, because they add a little bit of color and a little bit of, I don't know, visual flair to the design. And so I like these, and when I first started showing this to people went, "Oh, those drive me nuts." So I came up with a second way of doing it, and I will talk about that second way. So the first thing that I need to do is I need to make sure that these things are going to fit inside, and they should fit all the way, and I have just broken one of those off. And that is one of the reasons why I changed the way I put these things together. Mostly these do not hold the front door to the back door. What they do is they line it up. They register those 2 parts together. And so that's the primary purpose of these things. But there's a little bit of decorative thing, and you just saw what the flaw was. These things, they're a little bit difficult to work with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the scissors. Now, there's another way of doing this. You could use a file. You could use sandpaper. We could use, if this was, is this small enough to get in there? It is not small enough to get in there. Yeah, it won't fit in there. So there are a bunch of different ways. I like using these scissors, and I just twist them around in here. Twist them around in there until the pegs easily fit inside. So here, let me just twist them around. And as I said, these are titanium bladed scissors. I really like them. They're not very expensive at all. I got these at Michael's for, I don't know, for a pack of 3 or 4 sets of scissors for, I don't know, $12, something like that. Not very much. But, Fiskars makes them, and they're very high quality. And you see, look at all that I've got going around. So this is kind of a bit of a dirty kind of part of the process. And we're just taking out a tiny bit of the plastic as we go. So now we want to make sure that these will fit in quickly and easily, and they do. And in fact, I'm going to press all 4 of them in. and they're designed to do that, which is run parallel to the, there we go, parallel to the ridge that they sit on, the plastic ridge that they sit on. So let me get that one in. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to show you a different way of doing all this as we move forward. Now this side is a little bit more difficult to get reamed, so be very careful because the points of these things are quite sharp. So you want to make sure that you don't accidentally stab yourself. I've certainly done that as I, jeez, look at that, I just stabbed myself. So that's what you don't want to do. I'll probably edit that out. If I'm smart, I'll edit it out. Okay. So we're just doing that. And now I need to make sure that the inside will fit. You want to make sure that the window where you read the film counter window, there we go, is across from itself. So, okay, and these are not fitting in yet quite well enough. So I'm going to see if I'm going to change the ends on this. Now, obviously you're not all going to have this tool, so you can use a variety of tools to get in there, but I'm going to use this tool and just file it out. The other method that I'm going to use will be with bolts. Okay, so there we go, and let's see, we're going to try it out again and see if they fit down nice and snug, and they are fitting down nice and snug. There we go. Okay, so now we need to kind of pry it apart gently because we don't want to snap off those pieces. So I'm going to pry it apart gently. And we're going to apply glue to this. Now I'm going to glue these two parts together. I'm going to move my tools over to the side. I'm going to glue these two parts together. I want to make sure, first of all, that they're clean. So I'm going to just rub down any parts. And we need that because these things need to fit flushly together. And boy, I've got a bunch of this stuff. I got to clean that off in a second. So you can either use the super glue or you can use the Scotch maximum strength glue. As I said, at first this stinks, so make sure that you are in a well-ventilated room. And we're going to glue these two panels together, and this is going to be what primarily holds these things together. Okay. I prefer the Scotch maximum strength glue, even though it has a lot of stink to it, a lot of odor. That odor fades, and it does not leave a white residue on the plastic. I don't know if you can see this one or how well you can see that one. Let me do that. See how there's a white residue around the edge of that? That is because I use super glue on that part. This glue does not leave that white residue. So I'm putting the pegs together and making sure that they fit down. And the rather than worrying about the pegs at this point, I am worrying mostly about whether or not the door itself is fully mated together, and they are. Okay, so that definitely is. So that's one way to make a door. Okay, so here is the other way to make a door. Now I'm going to glue them together, but before I glue them together, I am going to get some. These are 8mm long M5, 8mm M5. And so I'm going to use 4 8mm M5 screw hex bolts. And let me make sure which one. Oh, no, that's the next one. There we go. Okay, and so I'm using the 4mm hex wrench on 5mm M5, which is 5mm long bolts, hex bolts, and those 5mm long hex bolts are, 8mm long M5 hex bolts. 8mm long M5 hex bolts. So I am going to, I put the glue on there. That's okay, it can set for just a little bit. This is not super glue. So I'm going to put a bolt in each one of these 4 holes. So this is the other way, and this is, this actually adds a little bit of weight to the camera because these are pretty substantial hex bolts. And here, there we go. But I think it also adds a little bit of, I don't know, panache, a little bit of dash, a little bit of coolness to it. But they don't carry, but they don't have the color. They don't have the color effect that the plastic pegs have. So that is, there we go. Put that in, come on. Now, I'm going to screw 2 of them just a little bit longer, and I'm going to make them diagonal from each other. So they're going to be just a little bit proud of the surface. So I'm going to put them, and they're going to help guide these 2 together. So now, now I have my alignment, and I'm just going to screw these things in. Now, when I sent one of these models to Nick Lyle to put together, he had trouble finding the 8mm M5 hex bolt, and what he did instead was he got, I think, a 12mm hex bolt and put washers up underneath it, and that will work as well. There's nothing wrong with that system. And here we go. And I'm just tightening them down until you can feel that they're not really going to go any further. There we go. Okay, so that is your second way of doing a door. So you can do your door either way. You can do it with the color accent, or you can do it with bolts, and that is up to you. Okay, so one of the things that happens when you print a 3D model is, in fact, this needs to be printed this direction. So what's up is the back of the camera, what's up is the back of the body, and what's down is the surface that comes together with the lens cone. So this needs to be nice and flat and perfect. And this has a lot of detail in it. So we need to print this direction. Now, there are some parts on here. Let me see if I can make sure that you can see that. There are a couple of parts on there, right on there, where there's an overhang, meaning that as it prints down, it has to print this part, which is a support. And you see this is falling off. That support holds up these parts that print out away from the body on the higher levels. You need to go through and remove the supports on these pieces. So there's a support at either end. And then we have that same kind of ribbon. Oh, and there's a support up here at the top and for the front of the shoes. And there's that same kind of ribbon material that goes all the way around. And that is off. Now, okay, so there, even though this looks like a nice flat surface, there's a groove in here that we need to remove. And I'm going to, this is a previously built camera. You can see that groove. That groove mates directly to the groove that is in every one of the lens cones. So we need to remove some plastic that is in that area. So we're going to do that, and I'm going to do that with a matte knife. And it's going to take a little bit of just figuring out where that plastic piece parts. There we go. Okay. So it's just a little lift up, and this will come right up and out. So that was pretty nice and smooth. Now you want to, I'm going to just run my knife along the edge here just to see if there are any like remaining little grooves, any remaining little pieces that need to come out, and that's fine. Now, I also want you to see that inside, do you see these threads? Well, that's an artifact of the printer. And sometimes it prints, sometimes you get quite a bit of those threads, quite a lot of those threads. And the idea is to just pull them out. And there we go. Any of these, you'll see these at the edge of the design. You'll see these right at the edge of the design. And I'm going to cut some pieces out right here because they seem to have printed incorrectly on this particular one. So they're kind of sitting out, and they're sitting in the, you would see them at the edge of the frame. Now I'm one of those people, when I'm taking pictures, there we go. So, I'm going to go ahead and clean that area up with my knife because I like to see the place where the frame edge ends. So, that is, yeah, there we go. Okay, so there are a couple more. I had some stray pieces in this one. There we go. I think that's pretty clean. So you want to make sure that there aren't any stray hairs, filaments sticking up in there. And I've had cameras where that is something that happens. So, okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to take the paddles. Now, I already glued the paddles in. The paddle is just a flat piece of plastic, flat rectangle of plastic. I've glued that into my spindle, and I've done the same thing here. I've glued it into the spindle, and I used super glue on that because I wanted it to set pretty quickly. So these will fit right up here. Let's see. They'll fit right up at the top, and you should be able to spin them. If they are too tight to spin, you might need to just trim off a little bit of the edge of the plastic. They have that lip that's going around there. They call it the apron. So I'm going to just take that and just scrape it down a little bit. And let's fit that back up in there and make sure that it fits. And then it can turn. Now, a little bit of resistance is actually good. A little bit of resistance. You don't want it to put it, you don't want to put it in there and just have it fall out. You want a little bit of resistance in there. And that will keep your film taut, or it will help keep your film taut. And let me get that one. That one's much smoother. It has almost no resistance. In fact, it doesn't want to sit in there. That'll be fine. That'll be fine. We'll still work with that. Okay, so those are in. Now we have the knobs. Now the knob also has that little piece that we need to pop right out of there. We need to pop it right out of the top of this knob right there. Okay, and this one still has a little bit of that material that prints out. So I need to pop that area out. Okay, so, oh, hang on a second. I've got a little part I need to pop off here. See this part right there? That was one of those supports. I did not take that off. So there's another one back here. Just need to pop that up. If you don't take that off, it's not going to fit correctly. So, okay. So I'm going to fit this right down on top. And I'm going to squeeze them together. and make sure that they fit properly. Okay, and that has not fit entirely the way I want it to. So I might have to sand that down just a little bit. In fact, I'm going to do that. So I'm going to sand down those 4 edges. Sometimes, here, let me see how well that fits outside. And it's not quite, well, it's pretty close. I think I can get that without sanding it. So let me try that again. I'm going to put it up in there. And I'm going to just rock it. There we go. Well, it's not quite all the way down. We want, there we go. Okay, so yeah, that's pretty good. So I've got these 2 parts sitting together. There we go. They're nice and snug and up together. And now I have a 12 millimeter. This is a 12 millimeter M4. 12 millimeter. Oh, I have the wrong bit in there. And I'm using my screwdriver rather than the hex wrench. There we go. 12 millimeter M4 hex bolt. And that will put these 2 parts together and they'll get nice and tight. There we go. Okay. And you should be able to tighten this down so that the head of the bolt sits right flush with the advance knob. There we go. Okay, there we go. It's pretty close. It's sitting up a little bit high, but I'm going to go ahead and screw that down. There we go. Okay, there we go. So, I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. I'm going to just put in, whoop, there we go. Going to put that, yeah, there we go. Okay. Bring the 2 parts together. And they don't seem to want to be right next to each other, so let's make sure they fit. Let's see, they'll fit. Okay, so maybe they're not fitting quite as well as I would like them to. So I'm going to just trim off, oh, I see a little bit of an edge. So I'm going to just trim off just a tiny edge of this. It looks like right at the corners, the size is a little bit off right at the corners on this particular print. And okay, and let me see if they'll fit together now. Okay, that's still not quite where we want it to be. There we go. There we go. Okay, so they'll fit together. And now I need to push that out through the top. Okay, there we go. Okay, so I've got them fitting together, so let's put them together, press them together first. Take that and just spin it so until it gets to the right spot. There we go. Pressed together. So they're pressed together. I'm going to take my other M5 12 millimeter hex bolt and I am going to screw it down. There we go. Okay. Okay. There we go. Okay, so we have the 2 paddles that are in there and they are working properly. Okay, so that's your advance and your retraction. So the whole idea is that this part is going to fit right in here and fit right in there. Well, I need to trim off that little bottom part. You could probably go ahead and do that on all the remaining parts. Okay, so let me place that in. Now, if you can see, I can kind of jam this in. I can really push it and really jam it in. But that's not good enough. Okay, so if I really jam it in right there, that's not good enough. Because what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to be able to pull that out during the changing of film out in the field. And if it does not fit smoothly, then you're going to be in trouble. So right there, okay, so that's still a little bit tight. I should be able to just pull it out and pull it back in quickly and easily. So I'm just, now there are a couple of things that you could do. One of the things that you could do at this point is use sandpaper. So I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate that. I'm going to just hold the sandpaper down and sand down one side, and then I'm going to sand down the other side. Okay, so I've sanded down both sides. Now that fits in and slides out very easily. So it just comes right on out. Okay, that's the way that you want it to be. Let me go ahead and do the other side. They call Florida the Sunshine State. What they don't tell you is every day where we have sunshine, we also generally have rain. Okay. So there's usually a little bit of both. But you know, you never really advertise the rain state, right? Okay. So there we go. There we go. Perfect. Okay. So both of those parts are ready and they are in. Okay. So, and in fact, I'm going to test them. I want to make sure that the height is right. And what you do for this is you turn your knob so that the spindle is straight out, and you put that right on it, and then you dump this right in it. And if it spins freely, and then you've got it proper. And if you can take that out just by pulling that out by hand, that's exactly what you want. When I first built these, I made them considerably more snug. And when I was out in the field, I would have to really, really pull to get the film out, and that didn't work. So I fixed that. So again, this one's fits right in, and it turns freely and easily. So that's good to go. So in fact, I'm going to put this back in here. I'm going to put this on the other side and get it ready for when we're going to load the film. And I'm going to load the film after we calibrate the lens. So that is our as an upcoming step. Now, I'm going to take the door and I'm going to use the door with the plastic. Okay, so this needs to sit in and be smooth, and you need to be able to take it off at will. And you know what? I think it's just right. Okay, so now we're going to put the little, see, now maybe it's not just right because that came off. So, yeah, maybe it's a little bit tight. So if this is a little bit tight, let me put that back in there. If this is a little bit tight, you want to, and this is where this tool works really well. You want to just run this along the edge. Now you could use sandpaper, you could use a file, or you could use the blade of your knife, and that would work right there as well. Okay. Okay, that feels like I took enough off of that. Now, this is designed so that it can go either this direction, and if you do this direction, then you're going to advance the film. You only use the odd numbers. You're going to advance the film, and all of the numbers are going to be upside down. So you advance the film to the right. Or, since I like to see the numbers right side up, you can start the film on the right and advance it to the left, again using the odd numbers, and then you put it in that way, and the pictures will come right side up. So either way will work. That's up to you. Let's go ahead and put the door latches on. Now, these are the door latches, and we will need 4 M3 12mm bolts. M3 12mm bolts. So we're going to need 4 of those. So let me get those out. That's 2, and that is 4. So I'm going to take the little plastic stuff off of this. There we go. Okay. So now, the idea of this is we're going to just bolt these down, and they're going to slide and slide. And let's go ahead and put the door on so we get the fitting correct. And so I need to switch to the M2.5, and unfortunately, I don't have an M2.5 in my screwdriver set, so I'm actually using a Torx bit. But the Torx bit works fine. So, there we go. I'm going to put this on, and I am going to bolt that down. Okay. And so I'm going to do this for this side and for the other side, and I'll probably time lapse through this. I wish I could time lapse for real, but okay. Okay, so now what I'm doing is I'm moving this back and forth and tightening these bolts. I need to move this back and forth with my fingers, and it needs to be tight enough that this will not come undone without my direction, but it needs to be loose enough that it'll actually do it. And that feels just about right on that side. Now I'm going to do the other side as well. There we go. Okay, so this is very much like what you see on, this is a graph lock essentially. It is not a graph lock standard size, but it is essentially a graph lock, which is just that kind of sliding angle. So, and then the back comes off like that. So the body is done. Okay, so we're ready to put the grips on. They go on either side like that. This little funky notch goes down, and let me show you why that goes down. And I'm going to show you before I actually make it, so you don't, there's a hole in the top of this, and this is your cable release, and your cable release comes down, and this allows the cable release to kind of bend if you want to put it down on a surface. So that little funky part goes down. So that's how you know you have one side or the other side. So we need some more bolts, and these are M3, and they are M312s again. So we need 2 M312s, and I pulled out, unfortunately, one that was an M38. So M312. So I'm going to just go ahead and screw that in just a little bit until it is sitting a little bit past, and then I'm going to move it on there until it is in the right spot, and then screw it in. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Okay, so there we go. So the grips are on. Now there's one last thing that we need to do, and we need to put this together on the back. And this is optional. This is entirely optional. This is a film reminder, and it's just a film reminder holder, and it's designed to hold the end of a 120 box of film. So I'm going to take a box of film out of my pocket, and there we go. It's kind of beat up. It's sitting in my pocket. Look at that. Pretty beat up. It's ultra fine extreme. I love ultra fine. And the idea is that this just sits in here. So it's got two parts to it. So I'm going to just take this little bit off of the other part. And I printed this one upside down, so it has some support stuff on it. So I've got to pull that off. But that'll come off. So this is two parts. So the two parts have to glue to each other, and then they glue to the back. And how you put that on is up to you. I'm going to leave that up to you, but I'm going to show you 3 different options. So first thing is I just want to fit this together to make sure. Just want to fit that together first. So I have that fit together. Okay, there we go. And now I'm going to just put a drop of glue around the edges. So there are a couple of mating spots on this. So again, I'm using my stinky glue, but it doesn't leave any little discoloration spots on here. So, and it also will not glue myself to myself. So, okay, so that's that part, and that fits pretty well. There we go. And this just slides in perfectly on that. So there are 2 ways, or there are 3 different ways of putting it. So if you have the traditional left to right, you can put this upwards so that it fits up. Or if you're one of those people who likes their here, let me open up before I take that out. And you would rather go right to left so you can read the numbers the right side up. That's perfectly fine. You can put it up like that. Or if you're like me and you're probably not really gonna, I'm gonna do it one way then the other way, just put it sideways so you're sliding it in from the side. And in fact, this is the way I actually recommend. I'm gonna recommend that you glue this on sideways. Now this does not have a very specific position on the camera, and I'm just putting, just a dollop of glue across there. So I'm going to put it right there. I'm going to put it sideways, and I'm going to look at it. I'm going to make sure that I have it happily on the back so that it is top to bottom centered. There we go. That took just a little bit of time, a little bit of looking, and there it is. And so it is right there on the back of I just had to open the glue. Come on. So now I can slide in anything sideways. If I have my film going the other way, still gonna work. Still gonna work perfectly. So those are the parts of the body. The body's now done. So we now have the body done. We've taken off all of the the stuff that comes in when you print it. We put on our little locking mechanisms. We put the front and the back of the door together. We put the spindle and the knobs together. We did that. We put the grips on, and we put the little film door on. So those are all the different parts. So I'm going to put the body aside for a moment, and I'm going to talk about the lens cone, and I am going to talk about mounting the lens cone, the helical. This is a brand new helical. The lens cone, the helical, the lens board. Okay, so I have lens boards that are of 3 different center hole diameters. There is a Copal 00, Copal 0, and a Copal 1. Now the Copal 2 is too big. The Copal 2 is 65 millimeters. It won't fit on the inside of that. So a Copal 2 is, if you have a lens with a Copal 2 shutter, it will not fit on this machine. Copal 00, Copal 0, and Copal 1. Those are the size shutters that will fit. Now, I have a bunch of old lenses. Wow, I have a bunch of old lenses with plastic on them. This, by the way, will only cover 2x3. It will not cover 6x12. Or it'll only cover 6x9. It won't cover 6x12. This will cover 6x12. But it has a size that is a little bit different from everything else. So what do you do if the size is the wrong size? So let me grab an old one of these. This is actually an old model. And it may be a little bit difficult to see. I'll bring it all the way up. You can see that I have in a couple of places, I have trimmed that out. Now this is printed in a circle. At least that's the way I suggest you print it, rather than side to side. And if you print it in a circle, then you can peel out some of those rings of plastic fairly easily. Now, let me talk about this lens. This lens in particular is a Topcon. This is actually a top core, and it is a super top core. If you use the Topcon lenses, the lenses made by Topcon, you want the super top core. The super top cores will cover 4x5. The professional top cores, or just the plain top cores that are made for the Horseman 6x9 cameras, will not cover 6x12. So you want to make sure that you do that. So this lens has three parts. It has a back lens assembly, it has a front lens assembly, and then it's got a shutter in the middle. The shutter and the lens screw onto each other. Actually, I should say the front of the lens and the back of the lens screw onto each other. Now I'm going to take this one off and I'm going to put it down, and I'm going to talk about this particular one, and then I'm going to show you, here's another one. This has the same kind of configuration. It has a front lens, it has a back lens, and it has a shutter in the middle. The difference is these are just much smaller lens elements. This is a huge lens element, and what's great about this is a beautiful lens, by the way. So you have these two parts that sit together, and then you have a retaining ring. You have a little retaining ring for your shutter. Now, the shutter goes through the lens board. Now, here, let me show you the lens board. Lens board has a completely flat, smooth side. That's the side that prints down, completely flat and smooth. And then it has a side with a ridge. Well, you see that ridge? That's going to screw into your M65 helical. You put the smooth front side towards the front, towards what you're going to focus on, okay? Then you screw down using the retaining ring. You're going to screw this down. And you want that tight because you're going to do things like press down there it is, the shutter cocking mechanism, and then the shutter release mechanism, and you don't want it turning, so you do want it tight. There we go. Okay, so that is down tight. Then I'm going to put the back lens, whoa, didn't want to do that. The back lens onto the helical. Now, I'm going to show you a certain, so then I'm going to put the back lens onto the shutter, not onto the helical. I just said onto the helical. Now, there are a couple of different ways of working, but before we do that, I want to show you this is an M65 helical, which means the threads are M65. This helical actually is a little bit thinner, a little bit less in diameter than 65 all the way there. And if you notice, look at this. This just fits. I mean, I'm saying that it probably has a 0.5 millimeter of extra space. This is as big a lens as you can get on an M65 helical. When I got this lens, I was a little bit panicking that I wasn't going to be able to fit that on, but I do fit that on. Okay, so I'm going to start off by putting on this lens board on the helical before I put the lens on the lens board. And this is some pretty tight maneuvering. And the idea is you need to get this as flat as possible as you screw this in. Now you're using metal threads on the helicoid, and you're using plastic. It's biting into plastic, so sometimes you might need to just push down a little bit to even out the placement of the different elements. Now I'm just kind of pushing it in, screwing it in as I go, and I've kind of messed that up a little bit, so I'm going to do it again. So I'm going to just put that in. And there we go. Screw that in. Okay. Okay. So if we look at that, that is smoothly and evenly adjusted all throughout there. So now I'm going to put the front of the lens on and lock down the retaining ring. And you can't see that, so let me do it this way. So I'm going to just hold down the retaining ring. I'm going to lock that down. And you want that to be pretty tight because you don't want the lens to rotate when you're cocking the lens. So there we go. Okay. And then I'm going to screw on the back lens. Now I've done this before with this lens, and it's a little bit, well, I was going to say it's a little bit of a bear. It doesn't seem to ever, oh, no, see, it doesn't, it spins all nice like it's gonna work, but then it doesn't actually get in. It's a little bit of a bear. It'll work. I just have to, okay, get the threads level. To get the threads level on this, and that's not always the easiest thing. Ah, there we go. So it took in there, and then you screw that down until it's tight. It goes to, you don't want to never wrench that on because you may never get your lens off the lens board that's working. So here we have a lens in a helical using the lens board. So that's all perfect. Now The next thing is putting it on your lens cone. Now I've got another lens cone. This is the right one for this one, but let me grab. I have a fresh one. Let me see if I can find where it is. Okay, so here's a fresh one, and I've just noticed as I picked it up, there's a little piece of extra plastic in there. So I just want to pull that out, and I want to just run my finger around to see if there are any extra pieces of plastic. Now, the idea with this, and there's a reason why I'm showing you with this lens board and with that lens, or with this lens cone and that lens cone. This lens cone is a little bit bigger, and there are some dimensional stuff. Yeah, okay. So this lens cone and this helical, they don't quite fit together as smoothly as you would want them to. Well, let me say that again. They fit together a little bit too loosely. You can't thread them in. Now, this is good and it's bad all at the same time. So what we need to do is essentially, and this lens cone is the same way. So essentially what we need to do is we need to, and you can see that I've already done it, we need to make the diameter of this a little bit smaller. And the way we're going to do that is with some tape. And this is very similar to the idea of and I'm going to talk about this a little bit more. I'm not going to use those scissors. I'm going to use the big scissors. Let me do that. Let me do that. And then I am going to cut a very thin piece of this tape. And I'm using this special Scotch blackout tape. You do not need to use that for this. You can use other types of tape as well. And in fact, I had some gaffer's tape in there before. So if you think about the principle of if you've got a piece of wood that has a screw in it and it's been stripped out, it's been pulled out of, that screw's been pulled out of that socket. This is, for some reason, a little bit awkward for me to do while I'm talking. So it's been pulled out of that socket. What you do is you take a matchstick and you jam that matchstick down in the hole and glue it in. You can glue it in, or you can just jam the matchstick down in there. And that makes that hole smaller so the screw will now stick. So that's what I've just done. And so I'm going to screw this down, and it needs to be as flat as possible again. So this is again a delicate mating procedure. Okay, I am almost there. You can see by the effort it is taking me to do this, you'll get a pretty good join, and it'll be pretty stiff, which is what you want once again. But I am not completely level. I'm almost level. I am a little bit off. Okay, so there we go. Well, you want to make sure that these meet exactly the same all the way around, because if you don't, the plane of focus could be a little bit off. And this one is a little bit off. Keep turning. There we go. Okay. So that looks pretty, well, it looks okay to me. I'm going to do one more turn. Okay. There we go. Okay. And I have, there are a couple things that I want to talk about this. And if you look on the inside, let's see if we can see that. You see there'll be some tape that's kind of bunched up in there. And I need to get that out because I believe if I look at that, it's going to be in that picture. So I will cut that out carefully, make sure that I don't slip and do any damage to the inside of the lens. Some of that tape just bunched up, and there we go. So now I've taken that out, and that should not be in the picture. Should be not in the picture. There we go. So now I've got this. Last thing we have to do, and then we have to calibrate the lens. I'm going to say we have to calibrate the lens. But we are going to put, and let's make sure that we have a right side up and an upside down. This particular lens, the shutter cocking mechanism is over there, and the shutter release is right there. Boom, like that. So I want that on top. And that's what I've got. So now I've got to put this lens cone in the body. Okay, there we go. Almost. There we go. Pretty close. There we go. Okay, so that's all sitting flat. And I need to get my... there are a couple of... these are M4 threads, M4 bolts, and they are 12 millimeter M4. 12 millimeter M4, and I'm going to tighten that down. Now I have a body that I've swapped out a bunch of different lenses on, and in fact, actually, it's this one that's right over here, and I kind of stripped out the threads on this portion. And I'm going to show you what I did to not burn that body, and not completely ruin the body. So there's your camera. It is together. It is perfectly together. Now you can put on it a rangefinder. I didn't talk about this in my accessories, but there's a rangefinder. You can put a rangefinder on there. Okay. And, we have one more thing to assemble. The rangefinder, there we go. There's the rangefinder that's on there. And we have one more thing to assemble, and that is the viewfinder. So we're going to go ahead and cut that apart. And there we go. Cut that apart just a little bit. I'm going to trim out the little pieces. There we go. And this also has a support, and then it has that kind of trim area around it. There we go. There we go. Okay. This goes inside of this. Okay, so those two things go inside of each other. And depending on the lens, you just have to move it out or move it in, and that will give you the view. I'm going to talk about that more when we talk about calibrating the lens, but this goes right on top right there. And our little balance, our little bubble level, slides in on top of that. There we go. So this is our camera pretty much put together. So let me show you what I did for this. All these little pieces of plastic, all of these little crappy pieces of plastic that are sitting around. There we go. All of these little pieces. Well, I just peeled off a piece, stuck it down in that hole, and put it to the side and screwed in. Here, let me do it so you can see it. I just stuck a little piece down in there, cut it off, and that was, and then I just screwed it in, and it worked perfectly fine. So if you end up with that, that's that's the solution to that problem. So we have our camera together. We're not ready to shoot it yet because we don't know what the focus is. So that's the next step, and that's what we're going to set. That's what we're going to do next. So this is the assembly of the camera. That is the assembly of the camera. It's ready to go. It's a beautiful piece of hardware. I love it, and I hope you do too.